I never told my husband about my $2 million inheritance. He always treated me like a servant. I silently endured it for 15 years, and then he brought his mistress to our home. What I did next. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I never imagined that keeping a secret could save my life. For 15 years, I lived in that 2-story colonial house in suburban Ohio, cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, and playing the role of the perfect housewife. My husband, Richard, never knew about the $2 million my grandmother left me when I was 28. I had my reasons for keeping it hidden, and those reasons became clearer with every passing year. Back then, when Grandma Rose passed away, Richard and I had only been married for 3 years. We were young, supposedly in love, building our future together. But even then, I noticed small things. The way he'd make decisions without asking me, how he'd criticize my cooking if dinner wasn't ready exactly at 6. The condescending tone when he explained things I already knew. My mother always said, "Margaret, don't rush to share everything. A woman needs something of her own." I thought she was old-fashioned. Turns out she was right. I deposited that inheritance in a separate account my grandmother had helped me set up years before at a different bank across town. Richard never asked about my errands there. Why would he? I was just his wife, running household tasks, nothing important. The money sat there, quietly growing, while I scrubbed his floors and ironed his shirts. The years passed like pages in a book I couldn't put down, even though I hated the story. Richard climbed the corporate ladder at his accounting firm, earning more each year, but our life never really changed. We didn't take vacations I wanted. We didn't remodel the kitchen I cooked in every single day. His needs, his career, his preferences, they filled every corner of our existence. And I? I was the backdrop, the supporting character in Richard's life story. Was I unhappy? Sometimes. Was I aware of how small I'd become? Not really. It's strange how you can lose yourself one tiny compromise at a time. One dismissed opinion. One eye roll when you speak. By year 10, I'd stopped sharing my thoughts at dinner parties. By year 12, I'd stopped having thoughts worth sharing, or so I believed. Then came that Tuesday in March. I remember because it was trash day, and I'd just hauled the bins to the curb when I saw an unfamiliar silver BMW in our driveway. Not parked on the street, in our driveway, bold as brass. I walked back into the house through the kitchen door, wiping my hands on my apron, expecting maybe a colleague of Richard's dropping by unexpectedly. What I found instead rewrote everything. Richard was in our living room. The living room where we'd celebrated Christmases, where we'd hosted his boring work dinners, where I'd arranged flowers every week for 15 years. He was there with a woman I'd never seen before. She was younger, maybe 40, with carefully highlighted hair and a burgundy dress that cost more than my entire wardrobe. They weren't just talking. They were standing close, too close, and Richard had his hand on her waist in a way he hadn't touched me in years. The intimacy of it, the casual ownership in that gesture, it told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't new, this wasn't a mistake. This was established, comfortable, real. I must have made a sound because they both turned. The woman had the decency to look startled. Richard. Richard looked annoyed, not guilty, not apologetic, annoyed that I'd interrupted. "Margaret," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience. "This is Vanessa. We have some business matters to discuss. Could you make us some coffee?" Could I make them coffee? In my house. After walking in on my husband with another woman. He wanted me to serve them refreshments. The world tilted sideways for a moment. 15 years of small humiliations crystallized into one perfect, sharp point of clarity. I looked at Vanessa, who was now smiling, actually smiling, with a mixture of pity and triumph in her eyes. I looked at Richard, who was already turning back to her, dismissing me. And I thought about the $2 million sitting in that account across town, the money he knew nothing about, the secret that was about to become my weapon. Of course, I heard myself say, my voice steady and distant. I'll put the coffee on right away. I walked to the kitchen, my hands trembling only slightly, and began to plan. I stood in the kitchen, measuring coffee grounds with mechanical precision, while my mind raced through 15 years of marriage like flipping through a photo album that suddenly made horrible sense. How long had this been going on? Months? Years? And how many times had I been this blind, this trusting, this pathetically domestic? The coffee maker gurgled to life, and I gripped the counter, forcing myself to breathe. Through the doorway, I could hear their voices, low, intimate, punctuated by Vanessa's laugh. That laugh, light and carefree, the sound of a woman who wasn't expected to clean up after herself or worry about whether the pot roast would be dry. What had I lost? The question hammered through my shock. I'd lost my career. I'd been a promising accountant myself once, before Richard convinced me we didn't need two people chasing promotions, and wouldn't it be better if someone managed the home properly? I'd lost my friends, gradually, as Richard found reasons why we couldn't attend their gatherings, or why my book club night conflicted with his networking dinners. I'd lost my identity, piece by piece, until I was just Richard's wife, the woman who kept his house and asked for nothing. And what had Richard lost? Nothing. He'd gained everything: a clean house, home-cooked meals, a presentable spouse for company events, and apparently the freedom to parade his mistress through our living room while I made them coffee. The rage came then, cold and clarifying. Not the hot, explosive anger that makes you scream and throw things. This was different. This was ice forming over a deep lake, hard and clear and dangerous to anyone who tried to walk on it. I arranged 3 cups on a tray with steady hands, added cream and sugar, found the good cookies I'd baked yesterday. For him, always for him. As I worked, a thought crystallized. Richard didn't know about the money. That ignorance was power. The only power I'd had in years, and I'd kept it without even realizing I was protecting myself. What could $2 million buy? Freedom, certainly. But more than that, it could buy justice. Revenge? Maybe. Or maybe just the life I should have been living all along. I carried the tray into the living room. They'd separated slightly, probably thinking they'd been subtle earlier. Vanessa was perched on my sofa, legs crossed elegantly, while Richard stood by the window looking like a man who owned everything in sight. "Here we are," I said pleasantly, setting down the tray. "Fresh coffee. The cookies are chocolate chip. I just baked them yesterday." Vanessa's smile was saccharine. "How domestic of you. Richard's told me you're quite the homemaker." "Has he?" I poured coffee with a steady hand. "How nice that you two have such detailed conversations." The barb landed, but lightly. Richard frowned. "Margaret, Vanessa is a consultant on a project at the firm. We're discussing—" "I'm sure it's very important," I interrupted gently. "I'll leave you to it. I have errands to run anyway." That was true. I did have errands now, very specific ones. Richard looked relieved. "Take your time. We'll be a while." I collected my purse and keys, walking past them with my head high. Neither of them knew they'd just handed me the final piece of information I needed. Richard wasn't even trying to hide this anymore. That meant he felt secure, untouchable. That meant he thought I had no options. Men like Richard always underestimated women like me. In the car, I sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My phone was in my hand before I consciously decided to pick it up. I had 3 calls to make, and I knew exactly who to contact first. Diana Marsh. We'd been friends in college before Richard gradually edged her out of my life, claiming her divorce made her toxic to be around. Diana was a family law attorney now, one of the best in the state. We'd exchanged Christmas cards every year, mine always cheerful and impersonal, hers always with a handwritten note. Call me if you ever need anything. My finger hovered over her number. This was the point of no return. Once I made this call, once I set things in motion, there would be no going back to the comfortable numbness of my old life. I thought about Vanessa's triumphant smile, about Richard's casual dismissal, about 15 years of making myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared. I pressed dial. "Diana?" I said when she answered. "It's Margaret Chen. Remember when you said to call if I ever needed anything? I need something now. I need a divorce attorney, and I need someone Richard won't see coming." There was a pause. Then Diana's voice came through, sharp and alert. "I've been waiting for this call for 10 years. Don't say another word until you're in my office. Can you come now?" "I'm already driving," I said, and I was. Away from that house, away from that life, towards something I couldn't quite see yet but knew was mine for the taking. Diana's office was in a steel and glass building downtown, the kind of place I never went anymore. As I rode the elevator to the 12th floor, I caught my reflection in the polished doors. A 63-year-old woman in a plain cardigan and comfortable shoes, clutching a worn purse. I looked exactly like what I was, a housewife. Harmless, invisible, perfect. Diana stood when I entered her office, and I saw the shock flicker across her face before she controlled it. I must have looked worse than I thought. She came around her desk and pulled me into a hug that almost broke my careful composure. "Sit," she said firmly. "Talk." So I did. I told her everything: the years of casual dismissal, the gradual erosion of my identity, and finally, today's humiliation. Diana listened with the focused attention of a surgeon examining a patient, taking notes occasionally, but mostly just watching my face. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Okay, first question. Do you want to save this marriage?" "No." The word came out so quickly, so certainly, that we both paused. I'd surprised myself. But it was true. Utterly, completely true. I didn't want counseling or second chances. I wanted out. "Good," Diana said. "Because from what you're describing, Richard is the type who'll use therapy as another platform to explain why everything is your fault. Second question. Assets. What are we working with?" This was the moment. I took a breath. "Richard thinks we have about 400,000 in combined retirement accounts and maybe 60,000 in savings. Our house is worth approximately 550,000, with 300,000 left on the mortgage." Diana was already calculating, her pen moving across paper. "So roughly 900,000 in marital assets, minus the mortgage. That's not bad. You should expect close to half, maybe a bit more, given the length of the marriage, and your—" "And I have $2 million he doesn't know about," I said quietly. Diana's pen stopped. "What?" "My grandmother left it to me 3 years after we married. I never told him. It's in a separate account. Has been for 15 years. Diana set down her pen very carefully. "Margaret, that's separate property if you inherited it before the marriage or kept it completely separate. But 15 years during the marriage, if there's been any commingling—" "There hasn't been. Not a penny. Separate account, separate bank, never touched. My grandmother set it up specifically to stay separate. She didn't trust Richard." A slow smile spread across Diana's face. "Your grandmother was a smart woman. Okay. This changes everything. With that safety net, We can play hardball. But here's the critical thing. Richard cannot know about this money until the absolute last possible moment. If he finds out early, he'll claim you hid marital assets, and it gets messy. So what do? Diana pulled out a fresh legal pad. We document everything. Every instance of infidelity you can prove, every asset he might be hiding, every penny he's spent on Vanessa. We build a case so airtight that when we finally strike, he has no room to maneuver. How's your memory? Can you recall specific incidents? I thought about 15 years of keeping my mouth shut, of noticing everything and saying nothing. Yes, I can recall. Start talking. Dates, times, details. Everything. We worked for 3 hours. Diana's assistant brought us coffee and sandwiches, which I barely touched. I talked until my throat was raw, pulling up memories I'd buried. Expensive gifts that appeared and disappeared, unexplained late nights, credit card charges to restaurants I'd never been to. Diana's face grew grimmer with each detail. "He's been careful," she said finally, "but not careful enough. Men like Richard get cocky. They think their wives aren't paying attention. But you were paying attention, weren't you, Margaret?" "Always," I said. "I just didn't know what I was going to do with the information." "Here's what happens next," Diana said. "You go home. You act normal. You play the perfect wife. Meanwhile, I'm going to hire a private investigator, the best one I know. We're going to document every interaction Richard has with Vanessa, every hotel visit, every dinner, every gift. Ohio is a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity still matters for spousal support and asset division, especially when there's financial component." "Financial component?" "If he's spending marital money on her, and I guarantee he is, that's dissipation of marital assets. We can claim that money back in the settlement." The predatory gleam in Diana's eyes matched something awakening inside me. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. This was about making Richard understand that actions have consequences. "How long will this take?" I asked. "Gathering evidence? 4 to 6 weeks. We need a pattern, not just one incident. Can you handle being in that house for 6 more weeks?" I thought about my grandmother's money, sitting safe and secret. About the future I was building with every minute in this office. "I can handle anything for 6 weeks." "Good. Because here's the thing, Margaret. Richard is going to realize something's changed. You're going to seem different, even if you're trying to hide it. People always do once they've made the decision to leave. He might get suspicious." "Let him," I said. "Suspicious isn't the same as knowing." Diana smiled. "I'm going to enjoy this case. Now, let's talk about what you do if he confronts you." As she outlined strategies and contingencies, I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 years. Powerful. Not because I was going to hurt Richard, though I wouldn't pretend that didn't bring some satisfaction, but because I was taking control of my own life again. I was done being invisible. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange double reality. On the surface, I was the same Margaret, cooking Richard's breakfast, doing his laundry, maintaining the fiction of our marriage. But underneath, I was someone else entirely. Someone watching, documenting, preparing. Diana's private investigator, a woman named Kate Chen, was worth every penny of her considerable fee. She followed Richard with professional discretion, and her reports landed in my email every 3 days like clockwork. Lunch at Giovanni's with Vanessa. Entering the Hilton, downtown at 2 p.m., emerging at 4:30 p.m. Shopping at Tiffany's, a bracelet, $4,000. Definitely not for me since I'd never seen it. I saved every report in a cloud folder Richard couldn't access. I photographed credit card statements when they arrived, I recorded dates and times in a small notebook I kept in my car. I was building a case, brick by brick, and it was almost satisfying how quickly the evidence accumulated. But Richard wasn't stupid. On a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after my visit to Diana's office, he came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, chicken marsala, his favorite, when he walked in and stood in the doorway, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You've been different lately," he said. My hand didn't shake as I sliced mushrooms. Different how? Quieter, more, I don't know, distant. I allowed myself a small smile he couldn't see. "I'm standing right here, Richard. How much closer can I be?" "That's not what I mean." He moved into the kitchen, and I felt his presence behind me, too close. "You went out that day, when Vanessa was here. Where did you go?" "Errands," I said, rinsing the mushrooms. "The dry cleaners, the grocery store, the pharmacy, the usual places." "For 4 hours?" So he'd been tracking my time. Interesting. "I had lunch with an old friend. Is that a problem?" "What friend?" His voice had an edge now. "Diana Marsh, from college. You remember her?" I felt him stiffen. He did remember her. The friend he'd spent years convincing me was a bad influence. "I thought you two had lost touch." "We exchanged Christmas cards. I thought it would be nice to catch up." I turned to face him, knife still in hand, expression mild. "Is there a reason I shouldn't have lunch with an old friend, Richard?" His eyes narrowed, calculating. He was trying to decide if I knew something, if I suspected something. The old Margaret would have rushed to reassure him, to smooth over his concerns. The new Margaret just looked at him calmly and waited. "Of course not," he said finally. "I was just surprised, that's all. You don't usually go out." "Maybe I should go out more often," I said lightly. "It was nice to have adult conversation for a change." That struck a nerve. His face hardened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just an observation." I turned back to my cooking. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. He didn't move for a long moment, and I could feel his anger building like a pressure system before a storm. Then he left the kitchen without another word, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. That night, he didn't eat the dinner I'd prepared. He stayed in his study until late, and when he finally came to bed, he lay on his side facing away from me, radiating hostility. The next day, Vanessa called. I answered the house phone. Richard was at work, and heard her voice, honeyed and false. "Margaret, it's Vanessa from Richard's firm." "I remember," I said pleasantly. "I wanted to apologize if my visit made you uncomfortable. Richard explained that you can be sensitive about his professional relationships." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. She was testing me, trying to see if I'd accepted Richard's narrative that I was the problem. "How thoughtful of you to call," I said. Though I wasn't uncomfortable at all. Why would I be? "Please feel free to visit any time. I'll make sure to have coffee ready." There was a pause. She hadn't expected that response. "Oh, well, that's very understanding of you." "I'm a very understanding person," I said. "Richard can confirm that. Have a wonderful day, Vanessa." I hung up before she could respond and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. They were rattled. Good. But that evening, Richard came home with a new strategy. He was charming at dinner, complimentary about the food, asking about my day in a way he hadn't in years. The sudden attention was jarring, calculated. He was trying to lull me back into complacency, to convince me that nothing had changed. "I've been thinking," he said over dessert. "We should take a vacation, just the two of us. Maybe that cruise you mentioned wanting to take." I'd mentioned wanting to cruise to Alaska 7 years ago. He'd said it was a waste of money. That's a lovely thought, I said carefully. When were you thinking? Next month? I could arrange some time off. Next month. Right when Diana expected to have all the evidence compiled. Right when I was planning to file for divorce. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Let me check my calendar, I said, knowing I'd find a polite way to decline. That's very sweet of you to suggest it, Richard. He reached across the table and took my hand, his grip just slightly too tight. I know I haven't always been attentive, but you're my wife, Margaret. That means something to me. I looked into his eyes and saw calculation, not affection. He suspected something, and this was his way of keeping me close, of monitoring me. Or maybe, and this thought chilled me, he was planning something. A vacation could be an opportunity to make me look unstable, to set some narrative that would favor him in a divorce. It means something to me, too, I lied smoothly. Let me think about it. That night, I emailed Diana. He knows something's different. Suggesting vacation next month. Advice? Her response came within an hour. Don't go. Make excuses. And Margaret, be careful. Cornered men do unpredictable things. If you ever feel unsafe, you call me immediately. Day or night. I looked at those words for a long time. If you ever feel unsafe. Was I unsafe? Richard had never been physically violent, but there was violence in contempt, in dismissal, in parading another woman through your home. I realized I didn't actually know what Richard was capable of when threatened. For the first time since starting this process, I felt a flicker of genuine fear. I took the next day off from my volunteer work at the library, a small rebellion Richard probably wouldn't even notice, and drove to a bank in the next town over. I withdrew $10,000 in cash from my grandmother's account and hid it in a safety deposit box Diana had helped me rent. Emergency money in case I needed to leave quickly. Then I went home, made dinner, and smiled at my husband across the table. Just 3 more weeks of evidence gathering. I could last 3 more weeks. I had to. The gifts started arriving 3 days later. First it was flowers, 2 dozen red roses delivered to the house with a card in Richard's handwriting. To my beautiful wife. I arranged them in a vase and said nothing. The next day, a jewelry box appeared on my pillow. Inside was a pearl necklace, delicate and expensive. The kind of thing I might have treasured 15 years ago. Now it just looked like guilt or strategy. Do you like them? Richard asked that evening, gesturing to the pearls I'd left in their box on the dresser. They're lovely, I said neutrally. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to give my wife a gift? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was watching me carefully, gauging my reaction. I suppose not, I said. Thank you, Richard. He frowned slightly. I could see he'd expected more enthusiasm, more gratitude, more of the old Margaret who would have been thrilled by this attention. When I simply returned to folding laundry, he left the room with barely concealed frustration. The courtship continued throughout the week. Compliments at breakfast, suggestions of date nights, an expensive dinner reservation at the French restaurant I'd mentioned wanting to try years ago. He was trying to buy me back, or at least buy my complacency. Every gesture screamed, please don't look too closely at what I've been doing, but I was done being managed. On Friday, Vanessa appeared at the house again. This time, she rang the doorbell like a proper visitor, instead of walking in like she belonged here. When I opened the door, she was holding a bottle of wine and wearing what I recognized as an expensive attempt at casual elegance. Margaret, she said brightly, I hope I'm not intruding. Richard mentioned you've been feeling a bit under the weather, and I thought some company might cheer you up. I hadn't been under the weather. This was Richard's doing, setting up this visit, probably thinking that if Vanessa and I became friendly, I'd be less likely to see her as a threat. The psychology was laughably transparent. How thoughtful, I said, stepping aside. Please, come in. Her confidence faltered slightly. She'd expected resistance. Oh, well, wonderful. I brought a Pinot Noir. Richard mentioned you like wine. Richard had never noticed what I liked or didn't like in 15 years, but I simply smiled and led her to the living room. Would you like some cheese to go with that? I just bought some very nice brie. That would be lovely. I left her in the living room and went to the kitchen, where I texted Diana, Vanessa is here, playing nice. This is her audition as the friendly other woman. Diana's response was immediate. Perfect. Let her talk. They always say too much when they think they're winning. I returned with cheese, crackers, and 2 wine glasses. Vanessa had made herself comfortable on the sofa, and she smiled as I poured. I have to say, Margaret, you have such a lovely home. Richard is lucky to have someone who keeps things so beautiful. Thank you, I said, sitting across from her. Though I imagine you have your own home to maintain? A tiny flicker of something crossed her face. Oh, I'm in a condo. Much easier. No yard work, no constant upkeep. Very modern and convenient. How sensible, I said. And you work with Richard at the firm? Consultant, she said quickly. I specialize in helping companies streamline their accounting processes. That's how Richard and I met. I was brought in to evaluate their systems. And did you? Evaluate their systems? She laughed, a touch nervously. Among other things, Richard has been very helpful in showing me around the city. I'm relatively new to the area. How kind of him, I said, sipping my wine. He's always been generous with his time for work colleagues. We talked for another 20 minutes, a bizarre dance of pleasantries and subtext. Vanessa was trying to establish herself as non-threatening, as someone I should accept in Richard's life. She mentioned how much Richard talked about me, how devoted he was, how lucky they both were to have me as such an understanding friend. When she finally left, promising we should do this again soon, I closed the door and leaned against it. My phone buzzed. Diana. Well, I typed back, she called me an understanding friend. They think I'm neutered. This is their victory lap. Good. Let them think that. Kate got photos of them at the Hilton again today. He's getting sloppy. I walked to the kitchen and poured the rest of Vanessa's wine down the sink. The manipulation attempt had been almost insulting in its obviousness. Did they really think I was that naive? That I'd befriend my husband's mistress and everyone could live happily in this bizarre arrangement? But I knew women who had. Women who'd accepted less than they deserved because it was easier than fighting, safer than being alone. The old Margaret might have been one of them. The new Margaret had $2 million and a very good lawyer. That evening, I drove to the community center where I'd volunteered, before Richard convinced me I was too busy for outside activities. Susan Park, who ran the literacy program, nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me walk in. Margaret Chen? My God, it's been what? 8 years? 9, I said. I'm sorry I disappeared. Susan pulled me into her office, and something about her warm, direct manner made the words spill out. Not everything, I wasn't ready to share the full story. But enough. About feeling isolated. About wanting to reconnect with my old life. You know what I thought when you stopped coming? Susan said. I thought Richard finally succeeded in keeping her home. He never liked you having your own things, did he? The blunt assessment stunned me. You could tell? Honey, everyone could tell. He'd show up to pick you up early looking impatient. He'd make little comments about how you were needed at home. It was textbook controlling behavior. But you can't save someone who isn't ready to leave. I'm ready now, I said quietly. Susan studied me for a long moment, then squeezed my hand. Good. So what do you need? A reason to leave the house regularly. Something that looks innocent but gives me freedom. She smiled slowly. The literacy program meets Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 6 to 8 p.m. We'd love to have you back. And if you happen to have other appointments before or after those meetings, well, that's your business, isn't it? I felt something loosen in my chest, the relief of having an ally, someone who saw me clearly and didn't judge me for taking so long to act. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you meet our new students. They're going to work you hard. She paused. Margaret, whatever you're planning, be careful. Men like Richard don't like losing control. I'm being very careful, I assured her. But as I drove home, I wondered if careful was enough. Richard and Vanessa had shown their hand today. They wanted me docile, compliant, willing to look the other way. And when I inevitably wasn't, what would they do then? They came together on a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after I'd started gathering evidence. I was in the garden, pruning roses, one of the few activities Richard never interfered with because he considered it beneath his notice, when I heard the car in the driveway. Richard and Vanessa emerged together, and there was something different about them today. They weren't trying to hide anymore. They walked up the path side by side, Richard's hand briefly touching her back, a gesture of casual ownership that told me everything about where this was headed. Margaret, Richard called out, his tone falsely cheerful. Come inside. We need to talk. A command, not a request. I set down my pruning shears carefully, removed my gardening gloves, and followed them into my own house. They were already in the living room, sitting together on the sofa like a united front. Richard gestured to the armchair opposite, the position of someone being summoned for a meeting. I remained standing. We've been doing a lot of thinking, Richard began, and we've come to share something important with you, something we hope you'll understand. I said nothing, just waited. Vanessa took his hand, a gesture so theatrical I almost laughed. Margaret, I want you to know that neither of us planned for this to happen. Richard and I tried to fight our feelings, but sometimes love is bigger than social conventions. Love. She was calling it love. Richard and I want to be together, she continued, her voice dripping with false compassion. But we also respect you and everything you've built here. We don't want anyone to be hurt unnecessarily. How considerate, I said flatly. Richard leaned forward. Margaret, you're a good woman. You've been a good wife. But we both know our marriage has been stale for years. We've grown apart. This doesn't have to be ugly or difficult. We can handle this like mature adults. Handle what exactly? I asked. A divorce, he said. An amicable, civilized divorce. You can stay in the house for now. We'll work out the details. I'll make sure you're taken care of financially. You won't have to worry. How generous, I said. Vanessa jumped in again. We could even stay friends, Margaret. I know that might sound strange, but I've grown quite fond of you. You're such a gracious woman. I'd hate for this to create unnecessary hostility. The audacity was breathtaking. They were asking me to step aside gracefully, to make their affair easy for them, to prioritize their comfort over my own dignity. And if I don't agree to this amicable arrangement? I asked. Richard's expression hardened. Then things could get complicated, difficult. Lawyers, drawn-out proceedings, public embarrassment. You really want everyone at the church, at your volunteer organizations, knowing your personal business? Knowing your husband left you? There it was. The threat underneath the false kindness. And financially, Vanessa added, her mask slipping slightly. Divorce can be very expensive for everyone involved. Legal fees, asset division. It could eat up everything you've saved. Wouldn't it be better to settle this quietly? You'd have the house, a reasonable monthly support payment. You could live comfortably. They'd already discussed this, planned it, probably with a lawyer of their own. They wanted me to accept a quick settlement before I could mount a proper defense, to walk away with whatever scraps they deemed appropriate, while Richard kept the bulk of our assets and his reputation intact. I looked at them, Richard with his entitled smirk, Vanessa with her calculated sympathy, and felt something cold and powerful settle over me like armor. "No," I said simply. Richard blinked. "No? No, I won't make this easy for you. No, I won't step aside gracefully. No, I won't accept whatever arrangement you've decided is fair." I smiled, and I saw both of them flinch slightly. "If you want a divorce, Richard, you can have one. But it will be on my terms, not yours." He stood, anger replacing the false pleasantness. "Margaret, don't be stupid about this. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I know every asset we have, every account, every investment. I've been managing our finances for 15 years. You think you can challenge me? You don't even know what we're worth." "Don't I?" I said softly. Something in my tone made him pause. Vanessa was watching me now with narrowed eyes, her friendly mask completely gone. "What have you done?" Richard demanded. "Nothing yet," I said. "But I will. You want a war, Richard? You'll get one. And when it's over, you'll wish you'd treated me better for the last 15 years. "You're threatening me?" He stepped closer, using his height to try to intimidate me. "You think you can threaten me? I'll destroy you in court. I'll prove you're unstable, vindictive. I'll make sure you get nothing." "Get out of my house," I said clearly. "This is my house," he shouted. "Actually," I said, "it's marital property, which means half of it is mine. And right now, I'm asking you to leave. Or should I call the police and tell them you're harassing me?" Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Richard, let's go. This isn't productive." But he was too angry now, too shocked that I'd stood up to him. "You'll regret this, Margaret. I gave you an easy way out and you threw it back in my face. Fine. We do this the hard way. But don't come crying to me when you're living in some shitty apartment because you couldn't afford a decent lawyer." He stormed out, Vanessa hurrying after him. I watched through the window as they got in the car, Richard gesticulating angrily while Vanessa tried to calm him down. They drove off with a screech of tires that probably left marks on the driveway. I stood in my silent house, my heart pounding, my hands shaking now that the confrontation was over. They'd meant to intimidate me into submission, and instead, I'd declared war. The fear came then, real and visceral. Richard was right that he knew our finances. He had connections, resources, 15 years of controlling everything. What if I'd miscalculated? What if my $2 million wasn't enough? What if— Number! I took out my phone and called Diana. "They came to the house," I said when she answered. "Richard and Vanessa together. They demanded an amicable divorce on their terms. I said no." "Good," Diana said firmly. "How did they react?" "Threats. Richard said he'd destroy me in court, prove I'm unstable. He's angry, Diana, really angry." "Even better. Angry people make mistakes. Listen to me, Margaret. You did exactly right. Never let them think you'll fold. We have 3 weeks of evidence now, and it's damning. Kate photographed them checking into the Hilton 6 times, eating at expensive restaurants, shopping together. He's spent over $30,000 of marital funds on this affair. 30,000? I felt sick. 30,000 we can prove. Probably more. And here's the beautiful part. Every dollar he spent on Vanessa is a dollar he has to pay back in the settlement. We're going to file next week. We have everything we need." "Next week?" My voice shook. "But you said—" "I said 4 to 6 weeks, and we're at 3. But Richard just showed his hand. He's planning to file first, probably tomorrow morning, to get ahead of you. We need to beat him to it. Can you come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m.? "Yes," I said. "Bring everything. Every document, every bank statement, every piece of information you have." We're going scorched earth, Margaret. By the time we're done, Richard is going to regret every casual cruelty, every dismissal, every time he made you feel small. After we hung up, I walked through the house slowly, looking at 15 years of my life. The photos on the walls showing a marriage that had died years ago. The furniture I'd chosen trying to make this place a home. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals for a man who'd never once thanked me. Tomorrow, it would all change. I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. The courthouse on a Monday morning was busy with the ordinary machinery of justice. People fighting over parking tickets, custody arrangements, small claims. Diana and I had a 9 a.m. appointment with the clerk's office. By 9:15 a.m., my divorce petition was filed. Richard didn't know yet. He was at work, probably planning his own filing, confident that he'd control this process like he'd controlled everything else. But I'd beaten him to it, and the advantage was now mine. "He'll be served at his office this afternoon," Diana said as we left the courthouse. "I've arranged for a process server who specializes in workplace delivery. Maximum visibility." "You're enjoying this," I observed. "Immensely," she admitted. "I've been watching men like Richard destroy women's lives for 20 years. It's deeply satisfying when one of you fights back." My phone rang at 2:47 p.m. Richard's name on the screen. I let it ring through to voicemail. He called again immediately, and again. By the fourth call, I answered. "What the hell have you done?" His voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "I filed for divorce, Richard. I thought that's what you wanted. Wasn't that what yesterday's visit was about?" "You had me served at work, at my office. Do you have any idea how humiliating everyone saw my partner's—" "Humiliating," I repeated slowly, "like having your mistress in our living room while I made you coffee." Silence. Then, "We need to talk. Now. I'm coming home." "I won't be there," I said. "I'm staying with a friend for a few days. My attorney will contact yours to arrange property access times." "Your attorney? Diana Marsh? That bitter divorcee? Margaret, she's filling your head with poison." "My attorney," I continued calmly, "will also be sending your attorney documentation of your affair, including photographs, credit card receipts, and a full accounting of the marital funds you've dissipated on Vanessa. We're seeking full reimbursement, plus additional compensation." Another silence. Longer this time. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Lower. More controlled. Dangerous. "You've been spying on me?" "Protecting my interests. There's a difference." "You vindictive bitch! I offered you a clean exit and you—" I hung up. My hands were shaking, but with adrenaline, not fear. Diana had warned me this call would come, had coached me on staying calm, on saying only what needed to be said. Don't engage. Don't defend. Don't apologize. The second call came an hour later from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Mrs. Chen, this is Martin Foster. I'm an attorney representing Richard Chen in the matter of your divorce." "I see," I said. "You should direct all communication to my attorney, Diana Marsh." Of course, but I wanted to reach out personally, woman to woman." "You're a woman?" "Ah, no, I misspoke. Person to person." "I understand emotions are running high, but perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss settlement terms before this gets unnecessarily adversarial." "We're past that point, Mr. Foster. Mrs. Chen, I'll be frank. Your attorney is known for being aggressive, hostile even. These cases can drag on for years and cost both parties enormous sums. My client is willing to be very generous if we can resolve this quickly and quietly." "How generous?" I asked, curious. "The house, of course, $200,000 in cash, and $1,500 a month in support for 5 years. That's quite fair given the circumstances." I did the math. The house minus the mortgage was worth about $250,000. $200,000 cash, $90,000 in support over 5 years, just under $500,000 total when the marital estate was worth at least $900,000. "Tell Richard I'll see him in court," I said and hung up. The real confrontation came on Friday, during the first settlement conference. We sat in a conference room at Diana's firm, Richard and Martin Foster on one side, Diana and I on the other. This was the first time Richard and I had been in the same room since the courthouse filing, and the hatred in his eyes was palpable. "Let's try to keep this civil," Martin began. Diana opened her briefcase. "Certainly. Let's start with this." She slid a thick folder across the table. Photographic evidence of Mr. Chen's affair with Vanessa Wright, including dates, times, and locations of their encounters over a 3-month period. Richard's face went white as Martin opened the folder. "Page 15, Diana continued conversationally, shows them entering the Hilton downtown on 6 separate occasions. Page 23 details approximately $32,000 in marital funds spent on gifts, meals, and hotel rooms." "This is entrapment," Richard started. "This is evidence," Diana cut him off. "Evidence that will be presented in court if necessary. Evidence that shows Mr. Chen has been conducting an affair for at least 3 months, possibly longer, and dissipating marital assets to support that affair." Martin was scanning the documents, his expression growing grimmer. "Richard, we need to talk. Privately." "No," Richard said. "No, this is—" "Margaret, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, I admit that. But this is— you're destroying everything." "You destroyed it," I said quietly. "Years ago, I'm just making it official. You want money? Fine. I'll give you more money. But these pictures, this evidence, if this gets out—" "Gets out where?" I asked. "To your partners? Your clients? Everyone who already saw you get served?" He lunged forward, and Diana was on her feet immediately, her voice sharp. "Mr. Chen, sit down, now." Martin grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Richard, for God's sake!" "She's been planning this," Richard said, staring at me with something like horror. "This whole time she's been— You were always so quiet, so passive. Where did this come from?" "I learned from the best," I said. "You taught me how to hide what I really think, how to smile while planning my next move. You taught me patience. I'm just using those lessons now." Diana pulled out another folder. "We're prepared to offer the following settlement. Mrs. Chen receives the house free and clear, with Mr. Chen assuming the full mortgage. Half of all retirement accounts, half of all savings. Full reimbursement of the $32,000 dissipated on the affair, plus an additional $50,000 in compensatory damages." Martin was calculating. "That's more than half the estate. It's justice for 15 years of emotional abuse and infidelity," Diana said flatly. "Take it, or we go to trial. And I promise you, Mr. Foster, your client's reputation will be in tatters by the time I'm done presenting evidence." Richard looked broken now, small in his chair. "You can't do this, Margaret. That's not who you are. You're not cruel." "No," I agreed, "I'm not cruel, but I'm also not a doormat anymore. Sign the settlement, Richard. Move on with Vanessa. Build your new life. But you'll do it on fair terms, not on your terms." He looked at Martin, who nodded slowly. "It's a reasonable offer given the evidence. Better than you'd get at trial." "Fine," Richard whispered. "Fine, I'll sign." The triumph I felt wasn't the hot satisfaction I'd imagined. It was cold and clean and final. This marriage was over. My old life was over. And I was free. The settlement took 6 weeks to finalize. 6 weeks of Richard's desperate calls and Martin Foster's negotiation attempts. But Diana was relentless, and the evidence was irrefutable. In the end, Richard signed. I got the house with no mortgage. Richard had to pay it off completely. I got half of his retirement account. I got full reimbursement of the $32,000 he'd spent on Vanessa. plus $50,000 in compensatory damages, and I got 7 years of alimony at $3,000 a month. The total settlement was approximately $700,000. But the real victory wasn't in the money. It was in watching his world unravel. Richard's partners were unimpressed by the scandal. 3 months after our divorce finalized, Richard was encouraged to pursue other opportunities. Vanessa left him 2 weeks after that. Apparently, she'd assumed she was getting a successful accountant with money and status. When he became an unemployed ex-husband, paying substantial alimony, she lost interest remarkably quickly. 1 year later, my life had transformed completely. I woke up in my sun-filled bedroom and made coffee exactly the way I liked it. The house I'd renovated was bright and welcoming, filled with colors I chose. I'd gotten certified as an accountant again and found work at a small firm helping women through divorce understand their finances. I had purpose again, value beyond what I could cook or clean. My social life had expanded beyond anything I'd experienced in marriage. I'd reconnected with old friends, joined new groups, started actually living. And I'd met James, a retired teacher, kind and attentive, who treated me like an equal. Meanwhile, Richard worked as a bookkeeper at a car dealership, making a quarter of his former salary. He'd tried to get the alimony reduced. The judge denied it, saying he'd created his own circumstances through his choices. Vanessa? Engaged to a doctor. Living the life she'd wanted, just with someone else's money. How does it feel? Diana asked during lunch. Knowing they both got what they deserved? Like justice, I said, but also like freedom. I don't think about them anymore. And I didn't. Richard had controlled 15 years of my existence, but with my grandmother's $2 million still sitting safely, he'd never learned about it. And my settlement, I had complete financial security. More importantly, I had myself back. I saw Richard once at a grocery store, looking tired, buying frozen dinners alone. He saw me, too, opened his mouth like he wanted to speak. I turned and walked away. That evening, I sat in my renovated living room with wine, reviewing a case for work. Music played softly. My music, my choice. The house was peaceful, not oppressive. I thought about my grandmother often. She'd known I'd need that money, not just as financial security, but as the foundation for courage. I'd learned that secrets can be power, that patience is a weapon, that the woman who seems weakest might be gathering her strength for years. I was 64 years old, and I'd never been happier. The rest of my life was mine, and I intended to live every single one of those years on my own terms. So what did I learn from all this? That secrets can be power, that patience is a weapon, that the woman who seems weakest might be gathering her strength for years. I learned that you're never too old to start over, never too far gone to reclaim yourself, never too broken to rebuild. But mostly, I learned this: the people who dismiss you, who take you for granted, who treat you like you don't matter, they're making a dangerous mistake. Because one day, you'll stop accepting their version of your story and start writing your own. What would you have done in my place? Thank you for listening.
My husband left an inheritance of $8 million, and I decided not to tell anyone. Thank God I did. On Monday, I asked my daughter-in-law to lend me $10. She replied, "Get a job, you lazy old woman." I said 3 words that left her in shock. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment from what city you're watching so I can see the reach of my story. My name is Viola, and at 64 years old, I thought I understood what loneliness meant. I was wrong. True loneliness isn't being alone. It's being surrounded by family who wish you weren't there. 6 months ago, I buried my husband, Lionel, after 42 years of marriage. The funeral was beautiful, if you can call watching your life partner disappear under the earth beautiful. But what came after? That's when I learned what true pain island. The house feels huge now. Every morning I wake up reaching for Lionel's warm body, only to find cold sheets. The silence is deafening. Gone are his terrible jokes at breakfast. Gone are the soft snores that used to keep me awake. And now I would give anything to hear them again. But the worst part isn't the grief. It's watching my own son treat me as if I were already dead. David used to call me every Sunday when Lionel was alive. We'd talk about the kids, his work, plans for the weekend. Now, 3 weeks can go by without hearing from him. When he does call, it's brief and forced, like checking something off his to-do list. "How are you holding up, Mom?" "I'm managing, honey." "Good. Good. Well, I should go. Jessica needs help with dinner." Click. That's my daughter-in-law, Jessica. 28 years old, blonde, beautiful, and she looks at me like I'm something unpleasant. She stepped in. It wasn't always like this. When David brought her home 5 years ago, she was sweet, even thoughtful. She asked me for family recipes, complimented my garden, and brought the kids to visit on weekends. That changed the day we came back from Lionel's funeral. I remember standing in my kitchen, still in my black dress, when David and Jessica arrived with their 2 children, Emma, who is 7, and little James, who had just turned 4. The kids ran to hug me, but Jessica held back, whispering something to David that made him look serious. "Mom," David said in a cautious voice, "we need to talk about your situation." Situation? As if widowhood was something I had chosen. "What do you mean?" "Well," Jessica chimed in, with that condescending tone I've come to hate, "David and I are worried about you living here all alone. This house is so big, and the expenses." I looked around my modest 2-bedroom house. Big? It could fit twice into Jessica's master bedroom. "I'm fine," I said. "Your father and I were careful with money." Jessica and David exchanged a look that I didn't understand then. Now I know exactly what it meant. "Mom," David said sweetly, "we know Dad didn't have much life insurance or a pension. We're just worried about your financial security." Jessica added, though her tone suggested she was worried about something else entirely. That was the beginning. Over the following weeks, their visits became inspections. Jessica would walk through my house, commenting on things that needed fixing, suggesting I could downsize to something more manageable. She'd open my refrigerator and scrutinize the food I bought. "Viola, honey, you don't need to buy expensive organic yogurt anymore. The store brand is just as good." She'd glance at my mail, shaking her head at the utility bills. "This heating bill is outrageous. You should keep the house cooler." David would just nod, agreeing with his wife, avoiding my gaze. My son, who used to defend me from his father's occasional grumpiness, now sided with a woman who treated me like a burden. The worst part was how they behaved with the children. Emma and James would run straight to me when they visited, excited to see Grandma. But I started to notice how Jessica would pull them aside when they asked me for things. "Grandma can't buy you toys anymore, sweetie," she'd say in front of me, loud enough for me to hear. "She has to be very careful with her money now." Emma, bless her heart, would look confused, but Grandma always bought us toys. "That was when Grandpa was alive," Jessica would say, shooting me a meaningful look. "Things are different now." Different. That word started to follow me everywhere. 3 months after the funeral, I noticed my car was making a strange noise. Nothing serious, it probably just needed a tune-up. But when I mentioned it to David, hoping he knew a good mechanic, Jessica jumped in immediately. "A repair, Viola? That could cost hundreds of dollars. Maybe it's time to think about whether you really need a car. There's a good bus route that goes right to the grocery store." A bus route. At 64. After driving for almost 50 years, she wanted me to take the bus as if I were a charity case. But I kept quiet. I always kept quiet. Lionel used to say I was too polite for my own good, that I let people walk all over me because I didn't want to cause trouble. He was right. The breaking point came last Monday morning. I had been feeling unwell, just a cold, but at my age, these things hit harder. I had run out of my blood pressure medication and was getting low on my arthritis pills. The pharmacy was only a 10-minute drive, but my car was making that noise again, and I was nervous to drive it. I called David. No answer. I called again an hour later, straight to voicemail. Finally, I swallowed my pride and called Jessica directly. "Hi, Jessica, it's Viola. Sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you could give me a ride to the pharmacy. My car is acting up." "Oh, Viola," she sighed as if I'd asked her to donate a kidney. Today is just not a good day. I have yoga, then lunch with the girls, and then I promised Emma I'd take her school shopping. It would only take a few minutes. Look, can't you just call an Uber or something? An Uber? To pick up a $10 prescription. She wanted me to spend $20 on an Uber. I don't have the Uber app on my phone. Well, then I guess you'll have to find another solution. Maybe David can help you later. But David didn't call me back that day, or the next. By Wednesday, I was feeling worse. The cold had settled in my chest, and I was almost out of medication. I counted the cash in my wallet, $37. Not much, but enough for the prescriptions and maybe a small bottle of cough syrup. That's when I made the mistake that would change everything. I called Jessica again. Jessica, I'm so sorry to ask you this, but could you lend me $10? Just until David gets paid on Friday, I need to pick up my prescriptions, and I'm a little short. The silence on the other end was deafening. Are you asking me for money? Just $10. I'll pay you back. Viola, her voice turned icy. I think it's time you accepted reality. You're a grown woman. If you need money, get a job. Stop calling here every time you have a problem. My heart started to pound. Jessica, what are you? No, I'm serious. This whole helpless widow act is getting old. You want money? Go work for it. McDonald's is always hiring. Maybe you should try being useful for once, instead of sitting around feeling sorry for yourself. Her words hit me like physical blows. Playing the helpless widow, feeling sorry for yourself. Get a job, you lazy old woman, she continued, her voice rising. Stop expecting everyone to take care of you. I stood there in my kitchen, phone in hand, feeling something crack in my chest. This wasn't just about $10. It was about respect. It was about family. It was about the woman my son married, thinking I was nothing more than a burden to be tolerated. You're going to regret this, I said quietly. Excuse me? My voice was calm and firm, though my hands were shaking. You are going to regret this. Are you threatening me? No, Jessica. I'm not threatening you. I'm simply telling you that you are going to regret treating me this way. I hung up before she could respond. For a long moment, I just stood there in the silent kitchen, listening to my own heartbeat. Then I went to my bedroom, to the closet where Lionel's clothes still hung, and I reached behind his old suits to touch the small safe he had installed years ago. Inside that safe were documents that would change everything. Documents that proved Jessica had just made the biggest mistake of her life. But not yet. Not today. Today I would let her believe she had won. After hanging up on Jessica, I sat in Lionel's old recliner and let the memories wash over me. 42 years of marriage, and I was still discovering things about the man I thought I knew inside and out. 3 weeks before he died, Lionel finally told me everything. He was in the hospital for his last round of chemo. The treatments we both knew weren't working anymore. The doctors had started using words like palliative care and getting your affairs in order. We both understood what that meant, even if we couldn't say it out loud. I was sitting by his bed, reading him the sports section like I did every morning, when he suddenly grabbed my hand. Viola, honey, we need to talk about something important. I put down the paper and looked at him. Even sick, even thin and pale from the chemo, Lionel's eyes were still sharp, still intelligent. What is it, sweetheart? There are things you don't know about our finances. Things I never told you. Why? Well, I wanted it to be a surprise for you if something ever happened to me. My heart lurched. Lionel, what are you talking about? He squeezed my hand harder. Promise me you won't tell anyone what I'm about to say. Not David, not Jessica, not anyone. Not until you're absolutely sure you can trust them. You're scaring me. Promise me, Viola. I promise. He took a ragged breath. I've been investing our money for 40 years. Nothing risky, nothing crazy. But I've been very, very careful. And I've been very, very lucky. I frowned. I knew we had some savings, maybe $20,000 or $30,000. We lived modestly, drove used cars, and shopped for deals. What kind of investing? Mostly index funds. Some blue-chip stocks. I started with just $50 a month back in 1982. Every single month. $50. Then when I got a promotion, I raised it to $100, then $200. You never noticed, because I had it set up to come out before our paychecks ever hit the checking account. I was beginning to understand. How much, Lionel? He was quiet for so long I thought he'd drifted off to sleep. Then, barely a whisper, $8 million. The room spun. What? 8.2 million as of last month. It's all in your name now, has been for years. The life insurance? That's just a small piece. This is our real legacy. I couldn't breathe. $8 million. My mind couldn't even process the number. But Lionel, why didn't you tell me? All these years, we were so careful with money, worrying about bills, because I wanted us to live normally. I wanted us to appreciate what we had, not get obsessed with having more. And, he paused, choosing his words carefully, because I've seen what money does to families. I've seen how it changes people. David would never. David might not. But what about Jessica? And what about the people we don't even know? And David's kids when they grow up? Money brings out the worst in people, Viola. It makes them feel entitled to things they haven't earned. I thought about that conversation now, sitting in Lionel's chair. He had been so wise, so careful. He'd made me promise to wait, to watch, to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing. Test them, he'd told me on his last day at home. See who loves Viola, the woman, and who just loves what they think you can give them. The test was over. Jessica had failed spectacularly. Over the next few days, I observed David and Jessica's behavior with new eyes. They came over on Saturday, supposedly to check on me, but really to continue their campaign of making me feel helpless. Jessica went straight to my thermostat. Viola, it's 72 degrees in here. It's way too warm. You're wasting money on heat. She turned it down to 68 without asking. David rummaged through my refrigerator. Mom, you're letting food go bad. You're buying too much for one person. I know how much food I need. But look at this yogurt. It expires next week. I'll use it before then. Jessica sighed dramatically. This is exactly what we're talking about, Viola. You're not thinking clearly about these things anymore. Not thinking clearly. At 64. Because I bought groceries for the week. Perhaps, Jessica continued, it would be better if we helped you with the shopping. Made you a list of what you actually need. A list? As if I were a child who couldn't be trusted to buy my own food. How thoughtful, I said carefully. But I've been doing my own grocery shopping for almost 50 years. That was when you had Lionel to help you spend it all, David said. Now it's just you. Those words stung more than they should have. As they got ready to leave, Jessica delivered the final blow. Oh, Viola, I was thinking about what you said on the phone the other day, about needing money. My stomach clenched. Yes? Well, David and I talked it over, and we think maybe you could use a purpose, some structure in your life. What are you talking about? David stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. Mom, there's a senior center downtown that has a job placement program. Nothing too demanding, just part-time work to help you. Supplement your income. Supplement my income. I almost laughed. What kind of work? I asked. Jessica's smile was sickeningly sweet. Oh, you know, cleaning services, meal prep, companion care for other seniors. Things that would suit your skill set. Other seniors. I was 64, not 90. You want me to clean houses? It's honest work, Viola. Jessica's tone implied that what I'd been doing with my life for the past 42 years was not, and it would help you feel more independent, more secure. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had sacrificed for, the person I had loved unconditionally his entire life. David, you think I should clean houses? He couldn't meet my eyes. I think Jessica has a point about having a purpose. A purpose. As if raising him, supporting his father, running a household, volunteering at church, caring for my elderly mother until she passed, as if none of that had been enough. I'll think about it, I said. After they left, I sat in Lionel's chair again and pulled out the binder he had given me before he died. Bank statements, investment portfolios, detailed records of 40 years of careful, patient wealth accumulation. The most recent statement showed a balance of $8,247,032. $8 million that my son's wife thought I should earn by cleaning toilets. I thought of Lionel's words again. See who loves Viola, the woman, and who just loves what they think you can give them. The answer was becoming crystal clear. That night, I made 2 calls. The first was to the financial advisor Lionel had worked with for decades, a man named Arthur Vance, who had helped turn our modest investments into this fortune. Mrs. Morrison. Arthur's voice was warm and familiar. How are you holding up? I'm doing well, Arthur. I think it's time we talked about making some changes. Of course. What did you have in mind? I want to move. Quietly. And I want to start looking at properties. Properties? Are you thinking of downsizing? I smiled, thinking of Jessica's constant suggestions about my too big house. Actually, I was thinking of an upgrade. The second call was to my sister, Margaret, who lived in Phoenix. Margaret was the only other person who knew about Lionel's investments, the one family member he had trusted completely. Viola, how are you, honey? I'm ready, Maggie. Ready for what? Ready to see what kind of people my son and his wife really are. Margaret was quiet for a moment. So Lionel's gut feeling was right. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry. Be proud of me. I'm about to take my life back. When I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Excitement. For too long, I had let others define who I was, what I was worth, what I was capable of. But I wasn't the helpless widow they thought I was. I was a woman with $8 million and nothing left to lose. 2 weeks after the suggestion that I clean houses, Jessica decided to take her campaign to the next level. She called it a family meeting, but it was really an intervention designed to prove I was losing my mind. It started on a Thursday morning when David called, his voice unusually formal. Mom, Jessica and I would like you to come for dinner on Sunday. We need to discuss some important family matters. What kind of matters? Just some things we're concerned about. Your well-being, your future. We want to make sure you're taken care of. The way he said well-being made my skin crawl, like I was a problem that needed solving. Sunday arrived, gray and drizzly, a perfect match for my mood. I drove my supposedly unreliable car. The noise had mysteriously vanished after a mechanic replaced a simple belt for $68. Less than what Jessica probably spent on her weekly manicure to David and Jessica's immaculate suburban house. When I rang the bell, Jessica opened the door wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark jeans that likely cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her smile was bright and artificial, like the flowers in her perfectly manicured entryway. Viola, come in, come in. Let me take your coat. She hung my old wool coat next to their designer jackets, and I couldn't help but notice the contrast. Everything in Jessica's world was new, expensive, perfect. Even her children's toys were organized in matching bins, nothing out of place. David came out of the kitchen, drying his hands on a dish towel. Hi, Mom. How was the drive? Fine. The car is running perfectly now. Good, good. But he didn't ask what was wrong with it, or how much it cost to fix. The David I raised would have asked. We sat in their living room, and I instantly felt like I was in the hot seat. David and Jessica sat on the sofa opposite me, a united front. The kids were nowhere to be seen. Where are Emma and James? I asked. They're at Jessica's mother's house, David said. We thought this conversation should just be for the adults. As if I didn't qualify. Jessica leaned forward, her expression serious but concerned, like a social worker about to deliver bad news. Viola, we've been thinking a lot about our conversation the other day, about your financial situation. What about it? Well, she continued, we're worried you aren't thinking about money with the same clarity you used to. It's perfectly normal for people your age. People my age? David jumped in, trying to soften his wife's words. Mom, what Jessica means is that managing finances can be overwhelming when you're dealing with grief and living alone for the first time. I've been managing our finances just fine for 42 years. But that was with Dad's help, Jessica said, her tone patient, as if explaining something to a child. Now it's all on you, and we've noticed some worrying patterns. Patterns? I felt my jaw tighten. What patterns? Jessica pulled out a small notebook. Apparently, she'd been taking notes on my life. Well, for instance, last week when you called asking for money for prescriptions. A responsible person would have budgeted for medical expenses. I had the money. I just didn't want to drive my car while it was making a noise, but instead of solving the car problem, you asked us for money. That shows poor problem-solving skills. Poor problem-solving skills. I was 64, not 14. And then there's your grocery shopping, she went on, flipping through her notes. David noticed you're buying too much food and letting it go bad. It suggests you're no longer processing quantities correctly. I bought 1 extra container of yogurt. It's not just the yogurt, Mom, David said, and hearing him agree was a knife to the chest. It's a pattern of miscalculation. Miscalculation about my own grocery needs. Jessica was just getting started. We're also concerned about your decisions at home. You keep the heat too high. You leave lights on, you're making choices that suggest you're not fully considering the financial implications. I keep my house at 72 degrees, because I'm comfortable at 72 degrees. But Viola, that's wasteful. When you're on a fixed income, every dollar counts. A fixed income. She said it like I was on welfare. We think, David said, looking to his wife for support, that it might be helpful for you to have some assistance with these decisions. Just until you're back on your feet. What kind of assistance? Jessica's smile was particularly radiant. Well, I've been doing some research, and there are some wonderful services for seniors who need help with financial planning and daily decision-making. Seniors who need help. I was starting to see where this was going. You mean a caregiver? Not a caregiver exactly, she said quickly. More like a life management service. Someone who could help you create budgets, make grocery lists, and even organize your bills so you don't fall behind. I have never been late on a payment in my life. Not yet, she said sweetly. But grief affects people in different ways, and sometimes the effects don't show up right away. David nodded seriously. We just want to make sure you're protected, Mom, that you don't make any serious mistakes while you're adjusting to life without Dad. Serious mistakes, like buying an extra yogurt. What kind of mistakes are you worried about? Jessica exchanged a look with David and then pulled out another sheet of paper. Well, for one, we're worried about you living in that house alone. It's a lot of space for one person, and the upkeep costs, my house is paid off. Yes, but there are still property taxes, utilities, and maintenance. We calculated that you could save at least $800 a month by moving into a nice senior community. A senior community. At 64. These places are wonderful, she went on enthusiastically. They handle all the maintenance. They offer meals. They offer activities. You'd have so much less to worry about. I like worrying about my own life. David leaned forward. Mom, we're just trying to help. We see you're struggling. I'm not struggling. I asked you for $10. $10, David. I asked for $10 one time. Jessica's voice took on that condescending tone again. Viola, it's not about the amount. It's about the pattern. First, it's $10 for prescriptions. Then it could be help with a utility bill. Then maybe you fall behind on your property taxes. I am not falling behind on anything. Not yet, she said. But we want to prevent that from happening. I looked at both of them, realizing what was truly happening. This wasn't concern. It was a takeover. They were trying to convince me, and possibly themselves, of my incompetence so they could step in and manage my life. You've already looked at these senior living places, haven't you? I asked. Jessica brightened. As a matter of fact, yes. There's a lovely place called Maple Creek, about 20 minutes from here. We took a tour last week. You toured a nursing home for me without asking me? It's not a nursing home, David said quickly. It's independent, living with supportive services. We just wanted to have options ready, Jessica added. We've scheduled an appointment for you to visit next week, just to see what you think. They had scheduled an appointment for me, without asking. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling with rage. Let me get this straight. You think I'm incompetent to manage my own money, my own house, my own groceries? You want me to move into a home for old people? And have strangers help me make decisions about my life? Mom, that's not. And you've already started making arrangements without consulting me. Jessica's mask slipped a little. Viola, you're being dramatic. We're trying to help you. Help me with what, exactly? With accepting reality, she said, her voice sharp. You are an elderly widow with limited resources. These are the kinds of decisions elderly widows have to make. An elderly widow with limited resources. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised to be kind and considerate and independent. David, you agree with your wife? He couldn't meet my eyes. I think we all just want what's best for you, and you think what's best for me is to give up my independence? I think what's best for you is to be realistic about your situation. My situation. As if being widowed had automatically made me incapable of reason. I grabbed my purse and walked to the door. Where are you going? Jessica demanded. I turned to look at them, sitting on their expensive sofa in their perfect house, so certain they knew what was best for me. I'm going home, I said. To my house that is too big for me, where I will set the thermostat to whatever I please and buy all the yogurt I want. Viola, you are overreacting. No, Jessica. I am reacting entirely appropriately to being treated like I'm senile. As I reached for the doorknob, I heard her say something that chilled my blood. This is exactly what we're talking about, David. She can't even have a rational conversation about her own future. Maybe we need to consider other options. Other options. I walked to my car in the drizzle, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. Other options. What did that mean? A legal conservatorship? Having me declared incompetent? For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt a genuine flicker of fear. But as I drove home, the fear morphed into something else entirely. A cold, calculated fury. They thought I was a helpless old woman with no options. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. The dinner invitation came exactly 1 week after their intervention. David's voice on the phone was carefully neutral, but I could hear Jessica coaching him in the background. Mom, we'd love to have you over for dinner on Friday night. The kids have been asking about you. That was a lie. If Emma and James had been asking about me, they would have called. They always did. What's the occasion? No occasion. Just a family dinner. Jessica is making pot roast. My pot roast recipe, the one I taught her when she first married David and pretended to care about family traditions. I almost said no. My gut told me it was another ambush, but I needed to see just how far they were willing to take this charade, and I missed my grandkids terribly. What time? 6:30. And Mom? Maybe dress up a little. We're having a few other people over. Other people. My stomach clenched. Who? Oh, just some friends. People who care about you. I hung up knowing this was going to be worse than I thought. On Friday night, I chose my outfit carefully. A navy blue dress Lionel had always loved, pearl earrings that had been my mother's, and my wedding ring. I wanted to look like the competent, dignified woman I was, not the frail creature they were trying to paint me as. David and Jessica's house was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Through the windows, I could see more people than usual moving inside. My heart quickened. Jessica opened the door in a black cocktail dress that was far too formal for a family dinner. Her smile was bright and cold. Viola, you look lovely. Come in, come in. The living room was filled with people I barely recognized. A middle-aged woman in a business suit stood by the fireplace. A kind-looking, gray-haired man sat on the sofa, a leather portfolio on his lap. David hovered near the kitchen, looking haunted. And in a corner, barely visible, were Emma and James, staring at their tablets, clearly under orders to be quiet while the adults handled important business. Viola, Jessica's voice had a professional cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge. I'd like to introduce you to some people who are here to help us tonight. Help us. Not help me. Help us. The woman in the suit stepped forward with an aggressive smile. Mrs. Morrison, I'm Brenda Davies from Senior Life Solutions. David and Jessica have told me so much about you. Senior Life Solutions. I'd never heard of them, but the name alone made me want to run. The man with the portfolio stood up. And I'm Dr. Mark Peterson. I'm a geriatric psychiatrist who specializes in helping families navigate difficult transitions. A psychiatrist. They had brought a psychiatrist to dinner. I looked around the room, the cold dawn of understanding breaking over me. This wasn't a dinner, it was an intervention. A formal, orchestrated attempt to convince me of my own mental incompetence. Please, sit down. Brenda gestured to a single chair that had been placed opposite everyone else, like an accused person's chair. I remained standing. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was invited for dinner with my family. Well, we'll eat later, Jessica said brightly. But first, we thought it would be good to have a conversation about your future, with some professional guidance. Dr. Peterson opened his portfolio. Mrs. Morrison, your son and daughter-in-law have expressed some concerns about your ability to live independently. They're worried about your safety and your decision-making abilities. My decision-making abilities, Brenda chimed in smoothly. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Many people your age experience some cognitive decline after the loss of a spouse. It's perfectly normal. Normal. There was that word again. What exactly do you think is wrong with my cognition? Dr. Peterson consulted his notes. Well, I understand you've had difficulty managing your finances. You've been making poor decisions about household expenses, and you've shown signs of confusion with basic daily tasks. I looked at David, who was studying his shoes as if they held the secrets of the universe. David, is that what you told them? He finally looked up, his face flushed. Mom, we're just worried. Answer the question. Is that what you told them? Jessica jumped in before he could answer. Viola, please sit down. You're getting agitated, and that's precisely what concerns us. I'm not agitated. I'm angry. There's a difference. Brenda made a note on her clipboard. I actually watched her write that my anger was a symptom to be documented. Mrs. Morrison. Dr. Peterson's voice was kind, professional, and condescending. I'd like to ask you a few simple questions, just to get a baseline assessment of your current mental state. My current mental state is that I am furious that I have been ambushed in my son's living room by strangers who think I am senile. Could you tell me what year it is? I stared at him. Are you serious? Just humor me. What year is it? It's 2024. The president is Joe Biden. We're in Westchester County, New York, and I do not have dementia. Jessica made a small noise of frustration. You see? This is what we mean. She gets defensive over simple questions. I get defensive when I'm treated like an incompetent. Dr. Peterson tried again. Mrs. Morrison, can you tell me how much money you have in your checking account? We were getting to it. Why? Because your family is concerned that you don't have a clear grasp of your financial situation. I looked around at the vultures circling what they believed was a helpless old woman. Brenda, taking notes. Dr. Peterson, observing me like a specimen under a microscope. Jessica, vibrating with anticipation. And David, my son, my baby boy, the child I had loved and protected and sacrificed for, was letting it happen. My financial situation is none of your business, I said quietly. But it is our business, Jessica shot back. Because when you can no longer take care of yourself, it becomes David's responsibility, our responsibility. Viola, you called me asking for $10. You can't get your car fixed. You're struggling to buy groceries. These are all signs that you need help. Brenda nodded understandingly. Senior Life Solutions specializes in helping families transition their loved ones into appropriate care settings. We've found a lovely community that would be just perfect for you. The same nursing home you visited without my permission. It's not a nursing home, David said desperately. It's assisted living. You'd have your own apartment, but with supportive services. Supportive services like someone else controlling my money. Dr. Peterson leaned forward. Mrs. Morrison, do you understand why your family is concerned about you living alone? Because they think I'm incompetent. And do you think their concerns might be valid? I stared at him for a long moment. This man, who didn't know me, who knew nothing about my life except what David and Jessica had told him, was asking me to agree to my own mental incompetence. No, I said simply. I don't. Brenda sighed. Mrs. Morrison, denial is very common in these situations. But the fact that you can't see the problems your family is describing could, in itself, be a symptom of cognitive decline. A catch-22. If I agreed I was incompetent, I was. If I disagreed, it was proof of my incompetence. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Jessica's eyes lit up. Well, we've been looking into the legal options. Legal options? Mom, David finally spoke. In New York, If someone is unable to care for themselves, their family can petition for conservatorship. The room went silent. Even Emma looked up from her tablet. Conservatorship. They were talking about having me declared legally incompetent. You want to take away my legal rights? We want to protect you, Jessica said, but her eyes were cold as ice, from making decisions that could harm you. I stood up slowly, clutching my purse. I think I understand now. Mom, please? No, David. I understand perfectly. I looked at each person in the room. You have decided that I am incompetent. You have found professionals to back up your decision. You have researched the legal process to take away my rights. You have chosen where you want me to live. We're trying to help you, Brenda said. You're trying to control me. There's a difference. I walked toward the door, but Jessica's voice stopped me. Viola, if you walk out of here tonight, we will have no choice but to move forward with the conservatorship petition, for your own safety. I turned to face her. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. If you don't see reason, if you don't accept help, we will have to turn to the courts. I looked at my son one last time. David, you agree with this? He was crying, but he nodded. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't watch you destroy yourself, destroy myself, by living in my own house and buying my own groceries. I walked over to where Emma and James were sitting. My granddaughter looked up at me, her eyes confused and scared. Bye, Grandma, she whispered. Goodbye, sweetheart. As I headed for the door, I heard Dr. Peterson say to David, You're doing the right thing. Sometimes families have to make tough choices. Tough choices. I drove home through my tears, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to my house, my paid-for house that was supposedly too big for me, I sat in the car for a long time, just looking at the front door. They wanted to take away my legal rights. They wanted to put me in a home. They wanted to control my money, my decisions, my life, all because they believed I was a helpless widow with no resources and no options. I got out of the car and walked to my front door, the keys feeling firm in my hand for the first time in weeks. It was time they understood just how wrong they were. Once inside, I went straight to the bedroom and opened Lionel's safe. The bank statements and investment portfolios seemed to glow in the lamplight. $8,247,000. I pulled out my phone and called Arthur Vance. Arthur, it's Viola Morrison. I need you to do something for me first thing Monday morning. Of course, Mrs. Morrison. How can I help? I want to buy a house. Something that makes a statement. What kind of statement? I smiled for the first time in weeks. The kind that shows them they picked the wrong woman to mess with. On Monday morning, at 8:30 sharp, I was sitting in Arthur Vance's office, watching him scroll through luxury property listings on his computer screen. The sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown office, illuminating the documents spread across his mahogany desk, documents that would change everything. Mrs. Morrison, I have to ask, Arthur said, looking up from the screen with concern in his eyes. Are you sure about this? Buying $1 million house is a major decision, especially so soon after your husband's passing. I squared my shoulders. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's see what's available. The first property he showed me was a beautiful colonial in Scarsdale, one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in the county. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a 3-car garage, and a backyard that looked like it was out of a magazine. This one just hit the market, he said. It's in excellent condition. Great schools nearby. Perfect, I interrupted. I'll take it. Arthur blinked. Don't you want to see it first? I trust your judgment. If you say it's perfect, it's perfect. Mrs. Morrison, we're talking about a cash purchase, $1.2 million. I understand, and I want to close as soon as possible. This week, if you can manage it. He shook his head in amazement, but started making calls. By noon, I had purchased a house 3 times the size of my old one, in a neighborhood where David and Jessica could never afford to live. But the house was just the beginning. For the next 3 days, I became a woman on a mission. I hired the best moving company in the area to pack up my old house with care and professionalism. I bought a new Mercedes sedan, nothing flashy, just something reliable and elegant that would never make mysterious noises. I opened accounts at the most exclusive shops in the area, the kinds of places where they remember your name and bring you champagne while you shop. Most importantly, I hired Caroline Hayes, the best estate planning attorney in the state. Mrs. Morrison, Caroline said during our consultation, your family's attempt to file for conservatorship is, at best, legally questionable. You are clearly competent, managing your affairs well, and have done nothing to suggest you need a conservator. But they will still try. People try all sorts of things when they think there's money on the line. The key is to make them understand that their assumptions are completely, utterly wrong. On Friday morning, I was putting the finishing touches on my new house when the doorbell rang. Through the beveled glass door, I could see David's BMW in my circular driveway. I opened the door wearing a cream silk blouse and tailored slacks, looking every bit the successful woman I had always been, but had never been allowed to show. David stood on my doorstep, his mouth agape, staring at the marble foyer behind me, the crystal chandelier overhead, and the sweeping staircase that curved up to the second floor. Mom. His voice was barely a whisper. Hello, David. Come on in. He entered as if walking into a museum, his eyes wide as he took in the elegant furniture, the original art on the walls, the fresh flowers in expensive vases. I don't understand. How about some coffee? I have a wonderful Ethiopian blend. He followed me into the kitchen, a masterpiece of marble countertops and high-end appliances, with a breakfast nook overlooking the pristine backyard. I poured coffee into porcelain cups and motioned for him to sit at the granite island. Mom, you need to explain this. How did you afford this house? I took a sip of my coffee. Your father was a very wise man, David. What do you mean? He invested our money for 40 years. Every spare dollar he invested. Very carefully, very conservatively, very successfully. David went pale. How much money are we talking about? Enough. Mom, I need a number. I put my cup down and looked at my son. Really looked at him. He was 32, handsome like his father, but there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before, a calculating look that uncomfortably reminded me of his wife. Why do you need a number, David? Because we. He struggled for words. Because we were worried you didn't have enough to live on. Were you? Yes. That's why we wanted you to move to assisted living. That's why we thought you needed help with your finances. We thought Dad didn't leave you much. Your father left me everything I could ever possibly need. David ran his hands through his hair as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. But you asked Jessica for $10. You said your car was making noise. You seemed like you were struggling. I asked Jessica for $10 to see what kind of person she really was. And I found out exactly what I needed to know. He went completely white. What do you mean? I mean, your wife proved to me that she has no respect, no kindness, and not an ounce of human decency. When someone asks you for $10, David, you give them $10. You don't humiliate them. You don't call them lazy. You don't tell them to get a job. She was just frustrated. She was cruel. And you let her be cruel. David stared into his coffee cup. Mom, if you had this money all along, why didn't you tell us? Because your father warned me not to. He said money changes people, brings out the worst in them. He wanted me to see who would love me for me and who would only love what they thought I could give them, and I found out. We sat in silence for a long moment. Outside, a gardener was trimming the hedges, the sound of his shears a steady rhythm against the tension in the room. How much, Mom? David's voice had gone quiet. How much did Dad leave you? I studied his face, searching for any trace of the boy who used to crawl into my lap during nightmares, who made me Mother's Day cards by hand, who told me I was the best mom in the world. Enough that I will never need anything from anyone ever again. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw Jessica's name on the screen. She's wondering where you are, isn't she? How did you know? Because I know exactly what this is about, David. You came here to see if I really have money so you can report back to your wife. That's not true. He couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. Your father left me $8 million, I said quietly. David's coffee cup hit the marble countertop with a sharp crack. Coffee splashed everywhere, but he didn't seem to notice. 8 million? 8.2 million, actually, as of last month. Oh my God, Mom, $8 million. Language, David. He shot up from his stool, pacing to the window that overlooked my new backyard. $8 million. And you let us believe you were broke. I let you show me who you really were. We were trying to help you. You were trying to control me. There's a difference. He spun around, his face red with anger. Do you have any idea what we've been through? The stress, the worry, the time we've spent trying to figure out how to take care of you? Take care of me? Or take care of my assets? That's not fair, isn't it? You brought a psychiatrist to your house, David. You talked about a conservatorship. You wanted to take away my legal rights. Because we thought you needed protection. From what? From living in my own home? From buying my own groceries? From keeping my thermostat at a comfortable temperature? He had no answer for that. I need to call Jessica, he said finally. Of course you do. He stepped outside to make the call, but I could see him through the kitchen window, gesturing wildly as he spoke. When he came back inside, his expression was completely different. Cold, calculating. Mom, we need to discuss this logically, okay? $8 million is a lot of money, more than you could ever spend, and you're not getting any younger. There he was. The real David, the one his wife had so carefully cultivated. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe it's time to think about family, about Emma and James's college funds, about setting up trusts, making sure the money is protected. Protected from what? From mistakes. From people who might try to take advantage of you. I almost laughed. People like who, David? I don't know. Scammers? Financial advisors who might not have your best interests at heart. But you and Jessica would. Of course we would. We're family. Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. Now let me ask you something, David. If I hadn't told you about the money, what would have happened next week? He looked confused. What do you mean? You were pursuing a conservatorship. What was the next step? He had the grace to look ashamed. We had a court date on Tuesday, and if the judge had granted the conservatorship, we would have made sure you were safe and taken care of. In the assisted living facility you chose for me? Yes. And who would have controlled my finances? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. We would have, he said finally. All of my finances, including the money you didn't even know existed. He realized where I was going. Mom, that's not why. Yes, it is, David. That's exactly why. You thought I was a helpless widow with limited resources, so you decided to take control of those limited resources. Now you find out the resources aren't so limited, and suddenly you want to protect them. You're twisting this. Am I? My phone rang. Jessica's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, David said. She wants to talk to you. I declined the call. It immediately rang again. Mom, talk to her. Why? Because she's my wife. Because she's the mother of your grandchildren. Because we're family. I answered on the third ring. Viola. Jessica's voice was completely different from how she had ever spoken to me before. Sweet, almost pleading. Viola, darling. David told me about your inheritance. What wonderful news. Is it? Of course it is. We're so happy for you. And we are so sorry if we misinterpreted your situation. Misinterpreted? We thought you were struggling financially. We were only trying to help. By calling me a lazy old woman? Silence. Viola, I was having a bad day. I said things I didn't mean. But we're family, and family forgives, right? Family forgives. But family also doesn't try to steal each other's legal rights. Jessica, what did you think would happen if the conservatorship was approved? What do you mean? I mean, who did you think would control my money? We would have made sure you had everything you needed. All 8 million of it. Another silence. Viola, can we come over? Can we talk about this in person? I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I looked at David, who was watching me with desperation in his eyes. No, I said simply. I don't think we need to talk. But Viola, we're family. No, Jessica, we're not. I hung up and turned off my phone. David looked at me as if I'd slapped him. Mom, you can't just cut us off like that. Watch me. What about Emma and James? What about your grandchildren? That hit me, but I kept my expression firm. What about them? Are you going to punish them for our mistakes? I'm not punishing anyone, David. I'm simply choosing not to be around people who treat me badly. We can change. Jessica can apologize properly. We can fix this. I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I felt something inside me finally let go. No, David, you can't fix this. Because this isn't about money or misunderstandings. It's about respect. And once you show someone you don't respect them, you can't take it back. So that's it? You're just cutting us out of your life? I'm going to live my life. For the first time in decades, I'm going to live it exactly the way I want to. He walked to the door, then turned one last time. This isn't over, Mom. Yes, David, it island. After he left, I sat in my beautiful new kitchen, surrounded by a luxury I had never allowed myself to enjoy. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. For the first time since Lionel died, I was exactly where I needed to be. 6 months later, I was sitting in my glass-enclosed sunroom, reading the morning paper, when I heard the familiar sound of children's laughter from the backyard next door. My new neighbors, the Hendersons, had 3 grandchildren who visited every weekend, and their joy was a constant reminder of what family should sound like. Margaret had flown in from Phoenix for a visit and was curled up in the chair opposite me, sipping coffee from one of my fine china cups. "You look happy, Viola," she said, studying my face. "Truly happy. I am happy. Any regrets?" I thought about that question. Did I regret buying this house? No. Did I regret revealing the truth about my finances? No. Did I regret cutting ties with David and Jessica? That was more complicated. "I miss Emma and James," I said. "I really, really miss them. Have you heard from them?" "Emma called me 3 weeks ago. She somehow got my new number." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "What did she say?" "She asked why I moved without telling her. She said she missed me." "And what did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes grown-ups have disagreements and that I needed some space to figure things out. But I also told her that I love her very much and that will never change." Smart girl. "And what about David and Jessica?" I put down my coffee cup and sighed. They tried everything. First came the guilt trips, phone calls about how I was abandoning my family, how Emma was crying for her grandmother, how they couldn't understand why I was being so cruel. Cruel? According to Jessica, walking away from your family over money is the most selfish thing a person can do. Margaret snorted. "That's rich, coming from someone who tried to steal your legal rights." Then came the bribes. Suddenly, they wanted to take me on vacation, treat me to dinner every week, include me in all their family activities. Jessica even offered to cook my favorite meals and bring them over. Too little, too late? Exactly. Then came the lawyers. Margaret nearly choked on her coffee. Lawyers? They tried to challenge my competency again, claiming I was making irrational financial decisions. They pointed to the purchase of this house as evidence of a diminished mental capacity. How did that go? I smiled, remembering the look on their lawyer's face when Caroline Hayes presented my case. The judge found that I was completely competent, making sound decisions and managing my affairs perfectly. He dismissed their petition and warned them about harassment. Good for you. The final straw was when they showed up here unannounced last month, with Emma and James. Margaret leaned forward. They used the children. They brought those babies to my doorstep and told them to ask Grandma why she didn't love them anymore. The memory still made my chest ache with anger and hurt. What did you do? I invited Emma and James inside, gave them cookies and milk, and explained that I loved them very much, but that their parents and I had some problems to work out. Then I went outside and told David and Jessica that if they ever used those children as weapons against me again, I would call the police. David looked ashamed, but Jessica, I shook my head. Jessica looked at this house, looked at my car in the driveway, looked at my clothes, and I could just see her calculating how much money she was losing by not having access to me. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Do you think David understands what he's lost? I think David is starting to understand that his wife is not who he thought she was, but I also think he's too far in to admit it. My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Mrs. Morrison? This is Janet Martinez from Cherry Hills Elementary. I'm Emma's teacher. My heart skipped a beat. Is Emma all right? She's fine, but I'm calling at her request. She wanted me to give you a message. What kind of message? She asked me to tell you that she's been writing you letters, but her mother won't let her send them. She wanted you to know that she loves you and misses you, and she hopes you're happy in your new house. I felt my eyes well up with tears. She really said that? She did. She also asked me to tell you that she's been saving her allowance because she wants to buy you a present, but she doesn't know your address. I had to clear my throat before I could speak. Could you give her my address discreetly? I think that would be just fine. She's a very mature little girl, Mrs. Morrison. She understands more than her parents think. After I hung up, Margaret handed me a tissue. That little girl loves you. I know. And I love her. Both of them. So what are you going to do? I wrestled with that question for the rest of the day. What was I going to do? I couldn't have a relationship with my grandchildren without dealing with their parents. But I also couldn't pretend that what David and Jessica had done was acceptable. 3 days later, I got my answer. A letter from Emma arrived in my mailbox, written in her second-grade scrawl on purple construction paper. Dear Grandma Viola, I hope you like your new house. I bet it's beautiful. Mommy says you don't want to see us anymore, but I don't think that's true. I think grown-ups get confused sometimes. I love you very much. Can I come visit someday? Love, Emma. P.S. James says hi, and he misses your chocolate chip cookies. I stood in my kitchen with that letter in my hand, and I knew what I had to do. I called Caroline Hayes. Caroline, I want to set up a trust for my grandchildren, full college tuition, money for graduate school if they want it, maybe something for their first homes when they're adults. That's a lovely gesture, Mrs. Morrison. How much are you thinking? $1 million for each of them. That's very generous. Do you want the parents to have any control over these funds? Absolutely not. The money goes directly to Emma and James when they turn 25. Not to their parents, not for them to manage. Direct access, only. I can set that up easily. And Caroline, I want to do one more thing. What's that? I want to send a letter to David and Jessica explaining exactly what they lost when they decided to treat me like I was incompetent. 2 weeks later, I hand-delivered a letter to David and Jessica's house. I didn't go inside or speak to them. I simply left it in their mailbox and drove away. The letter was simple. David and Jessica, I have established trust funds for Emma and James that will fund their college educations and provide them with financial security as adults. These funds are independently managed, and no one but Emma and James will have access to them when they turn 25. I hope you understand that these trusts represent what you could have shared in as a family, had you chosen to treat me with respect and kindness instead of cruelty and manipulation. I will always love my grandchildren, and they will always be welcome in my life when they are old enough to make their own decisions about their relationships. As for the two of you, I hope you find happiness, but I also hope you learn that family is not about what you can take from people. It's about what you give. Viola. Margaret was still visiting when David called that evening. Mom. His voice was different, subdued. I got your letter. Good. $2 million for the kids' education. They're good kids. They deserve a good future. And nothing for us. What did you think you deserved, David? He was quiet for a long time. I think I understand now what we did to you. Do you? We treated you like you were incompetent. We tried to take control of your life. We were wrong. Yes, you were. Is there any way? Is there any chance you can forgive us? I looked out the window at the beautiful garden I had created, the life I had built for myself, the peace I had found. David, I don't hate you. I don't hate Jessica. But forgiving isn't the same as forgetting. And trust, once it's broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. So there's no chance for us to be a family again? We are still family, David. We just can't be together right now. And Emma and James? They will always be my grandchildren. When they are older, when they can decide for themselves who they want in their lives, I will be here. That could be years. I have time. After I hung up, Margaret poured us both a glass of wine. "How do you feel?" "Free," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in my adult life, I am completely free. Free to do what? I smiled, thinking of all the possibilities that lay ahead. Free to travel without asking anyone's permission. Free to spend my money on things that make me happy. Free to help people who actually appreciate the help. Free to live my life exactly as I choose. And if David and Jessica change, if they truly change, then we'll see. But they'll have to prove it over time, not just with words. That night, after Margaret went to bed in one of my guest rooms, I sat on the back patio under the stars, thinking about Lionel. He had been so wise to warn me about money and families. He knew exactly what would happen. But he had also given me something more valuable than $8 million. He had given me the chance to find out who I really was when I didn't have to rely on anyone's approval. I was stronger than I ever knew. I was braver than I had ever been allowed to be. And I was finally, truly, happy. 3 weeks later, a second letter from Emma arrived. "Dear Grandma Viola, Dad told me about the college money. Thank you so much." Mom cried when she heard, but I think they were happy tears. "I still want to visit you someday. Maybe when I'm older, I can take a bus to your house. I love you, Emma. P.S. I'm learning how to make chocolate chip cookies for when I visit." I tucked the letter into my jewelry box, next to Lionel's wedding ring, and my mother's pearls, the things that mattered most. Someday, when Emma was old enough to understand, I would tell her the whole story. I would explain that sometimes the people you love disappoint you, but that doesn't mean you stop loving them. It just means you love yourself enough to protect your own peace. And someday, maybe years from now, there could be healing. There could be reconciliation. There could be a way for us to be a family again. But if not, that was okay too, because I had learned the most important lesson of all. I didn't need anyone's permission to be happy. I was enough on my own. The sun was setting over my beautiful garden, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I poured myself a glass of wine, put on music Lionel would have loved, and danced by myself in my kitchen. I was free, I was happy, and I was right where I was meant to be. Now, I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.
Dear friends, thank you for taking this journey with us and for sharing these moments together. This story is entirely fictional, created for entertainment, but also as a quiet reflection on traditional family values that many of us hold close to our hearts. It serves as a gentle reminder that family remains one of the most precious and enduring treasures in our lives. Beyond love, may we also guide our children and those around us with gratitude, respect, and understanding, so that these values continue across generations. Thank you for being here with us. We wish you peace, comfort, and warmth, and we look forward to meeting you again in the next story.